Greetings, everybody. We are back for another episode of the show, D-Live, the Convo series. And rule number one, when you're doing a live show, turn your phone ringer off because I'm getting a notification that I'm going live right now, which I know. So as a few folks come on and join us here, we'll be joined by Ginger Bock here in a moment. I will introduce her, but I'd like to give everybody just a moment to come online and remind you all, if you would please share this post, that would be amazing. Help us get Ginger's story and her message out. And of course, one of the cool things that I get the feedback that everybody really loves about the program is we don't just talk about, especially with people running for office, not just the campaign and all of that, but actually hear more about them and a little bit about their background and where they come from and why they're so passionate about what they do. So with all of that being said, we've got some folks joining us. So Ginger, thank you for joining us this evening. I'm excited to have you on the big show here.
Thanks for having me, Derek.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's just kind of delve right into it and share with us a little bit about your background. First of all, you have some amazing campaign colors. I really love those. But beyond that, we want to hear about your story, about your background, and how you got to be here with us right now. And then if folks have any questions or comments, we want to touch on those as well as we move along.
All right. Well, if anybody heard me talk in 2018 during my campaign, they heard about my baseball story. So anybody who is new to hearing me, you get to hear it now. So when I was 12 or 13, I'm not exactly sure when it was, but my school had a contest where one kid got to be the ball boy at a Reds game.
Wait, the ball boy or the ball boy?
The ball boy.
Oh, ball boy, not bald boy. Oh, okay, all right. I was almost offended for a moment, but it's okay. I'm not. I'm playing. Go ahead.
So I was really excited. I was a huge baseball fan. When I was little, my biggest joy ever was going to Reds games. My dad would take me, and I knew everything about baseball. Absolutely loved it. So I was really excited for the contest and submitted my entry, and then I found out a few weeks later that I was disqualified because I was a girl. And I complained. I was really angry, and my parents told me something that's really stuck with me, and that's if something isn't fair, it's not enough to complain about it. You need to do something about it. So I wrote letters to the editor, to my congressperson, and also to the Reds, and didn't hear anything back at that point. But the next year, or maybe it was 2 years later, a teacher told me that the rules had changed. So I don't know if I had anything to do with it, but I like to think that I did. And it really brought home to me that with advocacy, things change. Right. So I remembered that. And I've been active in various things ever since I was a kid. My mom would always take me to protests and to marches, and I've always been involved in various social justice efforts.
And to that point, let's talk a little bit about that, because I think it's important for folks to get an understanding of, why people do what they do, why they're passionate about what they are. And, especially from my perspective in the civic space, not only what we do for work when we're getting paid to be there, but what we're truly passionate about, that we're willing to give of ourselves and of our time. And I know you've been involved in a lot of volunteer efforts and nonprofits and those types of things.
Yeah, so before law school, I took 10 years off. I wanted to take a year off, and then it turned into 10 because I liked what I was doing. So I worked at nonprofits for 10 years, and my main focus was low-income women and children, and I loved what I did. A lot of what I did was fundraising. I also did some volunteer coordination, but it really helped me see. I had a privileged background. I had a privileged upbringing. So it let me have experiences with people who had very different backgrounds than me, and I'm so grateful to have that experience.
Well, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Oh, no, that's okay. I volunteered at a lot of different organizations. Some of them were women-focused. Some of them were LGBTQ-focused. Some of them were income focus. So advocating for lower income people. So and homeless and just all over the board, really. I was, I've always been passionate about things.
Right, right. And, I just made a note there as you were speaking just very briefly. I think it's cool when those of us, that are from, whether it's, I know myself as a white male and a former police officer, right? That gives me a particular standing in the community, especially with some groups more so than others. But when we recognize that and, leverage the word you use, privilege, to go to bat to help other people, I think that's really powerful.
I think it's very important that people recognize their privilege and use it for good.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. So, like, moving forward a little bit then, so you're in the professional realm, working with nonprofits and these types of things, not making $1 million by any stretch of the imagination in that space. And at some point you decide to go to law school. What was kind of the driving force there? What guided you in toward the law?
It was something that I had always wanted to do. And like I said, I liked what I was doing, so I kept putting it off. But eventually, I was in a particular job that I loved my boss and I loved the people that I worked with, but I realized I wasn't satisfied with what I was doing. And more, I was becoming aware of the disparities in our justice system. And I knew that I went to law school. Most people go to law school because they want to help people. And that's why I went as well. And I love law school, Derek. I am just kind of a unicorn in that way.
Right.
So most people hate it. I absolutely loved law school.
Well, I'm sure you got a perfect score in the bar, whatever that was on the first time around. I could never made it because I don't think my eyes are even that good to read all that 4 and 6 font that everything's written in. But tell us more about that then. As you went to UC for law school, was it? And
I did.
I'm looking at the diploma behind you. That was a clue. Going back to my police career, that was a little bit of a clue there I picked up on. So UC Law School, and then after that, what happened?
Well, I graduated summa cum laude from law school.
I knew it.
And
I knew it.
Yep.
I knew it.
And I did pass my bar on the first try. Did fairly well on it. And my first job out of law school was working for Judge Mark Painter at the First District Court of Appeals. And I'm an introvert, and I'm also kind of nerdy. I love writing. I love researching. I love reading. And when I started working for him, I kind of knew beforehand, but really when I started working for him, I realized that's the kind of law I want to be in, because I'm not the kind of person who loves being in court and loves being around a whole bunch of people. So it's perfect for me because I could be happy writing all day long and doing nothing else. So I realized that appellate law was really my jam, and I've primarily been focusing on appellate law ever since, up until about 1.5 years ago.
So tell us more about that, and that's for those that don't know. Maybe explain a little bit about the difference. For example, you're a judge. You could be a municipal court judge or a common pleas court judge. In this case, it's the Court of Appeals. Tell us a little bit about the system and how that works for those of us that aren't super clear on all that.
Sure. So the court that you think of when you think of a court, what you see on Law and Order or Boston Legal or whatever show, judge court show that you watch, it's the exciting stuff, the trials and the evidence and the witnesses. That's the common pleas court, or sometimes the municipal court. The municipal court handles misdemeanors and lower level civil cases. Common pleas court handles felony cases and higher level civil cases, 15,000 and above. So everything that happens in that court, that's the excitement. That's not the court I'm running for. The court I'm running for is considered more of a boring court. Not to me, but some people consider that.
Right.
There's no new evidence. There's no witnesses. There's no testimony. Instead, it's a 3-judge panel. And the job of the 3-judge panel is to look at what happened below. They read the record, they look at all the evidence, then they look at the law, and they decide, based on the facts of the case and the law, was there a mistake made by the trial court, and if so, is it reversible? And so their job is to correct errors if there are any errors made below.
Got you. So, and so sometimes we see, because they don't allow cameras in, for example, the U.S. Supreme Court is the ultimate appeals court, right? If somebody appealed a case as far as you could possibly take it, and then also the appeals courts have a choice whether to hear a case or not. Is that correct?
Not at the intermediate Ohio appellate courts. You are entitled to one appeal.
Okay.
So it could be a parking ticket, it could be a felony murder case, it could be a multi-million-dollar corporate civil case. You are entitled to one appeal. So for most cases, the First District Court of Appeals is the court of last resort in Hamilton County, because the Supreme Court is a court of limited jurisdiction. And for most types of cases, the Supreme Court gets to choose whether it wants to take a case. So it has to be of public interest or great general interest. So what that means, public interest generally involves some sort of government official, and then great general interest means that lots of people will be interested, whether they know it or not, in the subject of this case.
Right. And so
usually they take around maybe 5 to 10% of cases that people try to get into the court. So most cases, it's the last stop for justice is the appellate courts.
And how does that? And kind of one of the points I was trying to get to was just this whole notion of at times, like I'm just thinking, because they don't allow cameras into the U.S. Supreme Court, but you'll see those drawings that some kind of court artist does. And there are attorneys arguing. You're saying, or at least presenting some type of information to those justices. But at this level of an appeals court, that doesn't take place. It's only reading the record. There's no one advocating on one side or another.
Each side gets a 15-minute oral argument. So they read the record. The judges read the record, they apply the law, but the attorneys do get the opportunity to present their case. And usually the purpose of oral argument really is for them to clarify or to answer questions. So for that reason especially, it is so important that judges are prepared before oral argument, that they have read the briefs, that they have done their research, that they know what's going on before oral argument, so that they know what questions to ask and what areas might be a little bit murky.
So then it makes sense to me that with your background and your just interest, that you're perfectly suited for this, because it's literally doing all of this research. If I'm understanding you correctly, please correct me if I'm wrong. You do all this research on the front end. You hope that these judges are doing their job and actually doing that, and maybe just because these documents, could be pages and pages and pages, right? And so like it's a lot of work, and somebody if we're goofing off on our job or whatever, and we're just skimming and not reading the details and just getting the Cliff's Notes, maybe I'm not even prepared for that. So does that go on, that type of thing? I mean, I would hope it doesn't, but I don't know. Maybe that's why we need you in there to make sure this is happening correctly.
Well, I can only speak to what I knew when I worked there. The judge that I worked for worked very hard. He was a very good judge, and he was very, very strict to only base cases on the facts and on the law. I can't speak for what anybody else does and how hard they work. I don't know how prepared anybody really is in there. There have been cases where, not necessarily in the First District, but there have been times when I've gone to oral argument and I've suspected that a judge wasn't prepared for a case, which is incredibly frustrating.
Right.
Because when you put so much work into something and the judge isn't prepared for it, it hurts your client, and it just feels like everything that you've put into it doesn't really matter.
And you can probably get a sense of that based on the questions that they're either asking or not asking. It's like, well, if you would have really studied this case, you would probably already have a better grasp of that. But so that's great to know, and I think it helps our understanding of how an appeals court works, and why it's probably important to have a certain, even amongst attorneys or judges, folks that are really interested in doing that research to do the job properly. Is that a good, safe assumption?
Yeah.
Awesome. So go ahead.
No, I missed the last thing that you said, but
yeah, I was just saying that's we need somebody in there that's research focused like this. It's going to be super prepared, having done all of the homework, so that when somebody comes before the appeals court, that they know that they're getting a fair shake, that Judge Bock has a full grasp of the issues and knows what's going on.
Right. Absolutely. It's very important for people to be prepared and to like what they do, because it's more likely that somebody is going to do a good job with something if they like the work that they're doing.
No, of course. So let's talk a little bit about, I know there was one question I wanted to ask you. When we look at, and from our democratic perspective, and I think we've talked about this before, so people tuning in, we've had other judicial candidates on here, and we've touched a little bit how it's kind of weird because, the political parties make endorsements, but yet, when you go in to vote, there's no D or R by the names, because ultimately, I need to feel comfortable no matter what my political party is, that when I come before a court that, I'm going to be judged fairly, not based on, who I voted for in the last election necessarily. Having said that, we do know, and especially, and I've talked about this with Fanon Rucker, hopefully our next Hamilton County prosecutor who I've had on, we've talked about this, with Charmaine McGuffey running for sheriff. From the Democratic perspective, one of the things that I think is just a fundamental belief of our party is that, people need to get a fair shake, and that's frankly not always the case. It's not always happening. So when we talk about criminal justice reform and those types of things, one of the issues that comes up is, hey, what are the disparities? If we look across the landscape of the statistics, are certain folks, are certain demographics for similar crimes, let's say, are they being sentenced fairly, or is, for whatever reason, one group tends to get harsher sentences than another? And so is there a place right now, if I had questions about how folks are being sentenced in the state of Ohio, where can I go to look up that information, and so that I can look and see and do the studies about any disparities that there might be?
Well, you couldn't. Here in Hamilton County, unless you are a statistician and want to take the time to look at every single case, you can't do it. There are no public statistics based on demographic data right now. Some stuff's public, like how many cases a judge has had, that sort of thing, but there's no demographic data attached to that. I'm going to step back for a minute and tell you a little bit about the federal system.
Okay.
So in the federal system, the Federal Sentencing Commission did a study, I'm not sure how far back, where they found some pretty deep disparities in sentencing. And so the Sentencing Commission made this public, made the statistics public, and then so the judges knew that they were being watched and that what they were doing was going to be public, and they knew that it was transparent. And even with judges knowing that, from 2012 to 2016, on average, a black man got a sentence that was 19.1% longer than a similarly situated white man. And that's with transparency. That's with judges knowing that people are going to be looking at that. In Ohio, we simply don't know, because there is no statewide database. And so we don't know how deep the problem is. I think just about anybody, if they were being honest, would say, yes, there are disparities in the justice system, but we don't know how deep the disparities are. We don't know if it's worse in some counties as compared to others. It is absolutely necessary. And one of the reasons it's necessary is especially relevant to an appellate court. I represented somebody about 2 years ago in a federal case. he got a sentence. The federal guidelines top was 37 months for what he did and his criminal history. He got the maximum. He got 62% higher than the top of the sentencing guidelines.
Wow.
So my job was to argue that his sentence was unfair, that it was disproportionate. So what I did is I spent time looking at the very transparent federal data to see, oh yeah, it's definitely out of line. So I based a lot of my argument on that. Here in Hamilton County, if somebody is handling an appeal for a criminal defendant and they want to argue that their sentence was based on factors other than what it should have been, that data doesn't exist.
That's actually not only sad, it's a little bit shocking to me, because we hear a lot about, from the police perspective, in criminal justice reform and looking at all of those data, everything from traffic stops to arrest data and all of that. And so we're talking about, basically fixing policing in large measure based on measuring and looking at and analyzing that kind of data to see, for the same types of things, who's getting arrested and who isn't. But you're telling me that after they're arrested, after they get into the court system, that people are getting at times 20% longer sentences, over time, but we don't even know that because it's not, nobody's measuring. We can't go. There's no database. How can we fix this? It's crazy to me.
Well, fortunately, in the past few months, Chief Justice O'Connor has made it her mission to make sure that by the time she leaves the bench, in her last 2 years on the bench, to make this idea a reality. I've been talking about it since 2018 when I ran then. I'm going to keep talking about it until it happens because it absolutely has to happen. You can't fix the problem unless you know what the problem is and how deep the problem is. Wow. So we need to have this data. We need to keep working to fix the problem anyway while we're doing it, but we have to identify where the problems are.
Well, I'm glad you're focused on this because, quite frankly, I've not heard, I don't think I've ever heard anybody else talking about this. I'm sure they have, but I'm pretty tuned in to what's going on, and I haven't heard about it. So I think this is very important. Now, some folks might say, well, is that something that the state legislature has to do, or maybe the governor's office or something like that? Or with something like this, can you play an active role in making this happen?
Absolutely. It's the function of the courts to put out the court data. There is a sentencing commission in Ohio as well. So the courts, the clerk of courts, various clerks of courts, as well as the judges, we need to get everybody on board, or at least a critical mass on board in order to make it happen. And I will absolutely continue advocating for it. It doesn't have to be a legislative function or executive function. The courts can make this happen. No,
that's huge. And so what this would be, for example, you're telling me this might be a website, a public-facing website that anybody can go on there and look at this data and just see where we stand. And then obviously, as you mentioned, the first step in fixing a problem is knowing that you have one. And there's something that we can point to say, yes, this is an issue, and then look at, how do we fix that?
Right. I mean, absolutely. And with the federal system, it is that way. I mean, you just look up Federal Sentencing Commission and the statistics are there. There's charts and graphs, and it's really user-friendly. And I hope we have something very similar to that in Ohio.
No, that makes all kinds of sense to me, and it's kind of crazy that we don't have it. We do have a couple of folks stopping by and dropping comments. I always appreciate that. So Leon Spitz swung through and said, great to see us both. So I appreciate that, Leon. And Tori Lowry actually has a question here. So I will read her question. And she's talking about, and this is why I honestly love doing this show. I was in criminal justice for 26 years, and I learned stuff by speaking with you all. And so Tori has a question that says, how do trial court judges find the time to fully prepare, and perhaps the appeals court judges as well, to fully prepare for each hearing and run the live docket? And then how do they find to write all those appealable decisions? And that's a great question. I oftentimes even wondered that myself in my law enforcement career, where you're in court all day long, and then the judge says, well, I have a decision by, in 72 hours or something like that. And it's like, when do they do? Are they up in the middle of the night burning the midnight oil doing that? Or how does that work?
Well, judges have, in Hamilton County, each common pleas court judge gets a law clerk or a staff attorney, which I currently serve as a staff attorney for Judge Thomas Baradon. They also have a bailiff. So the staff attorney, what I do for Judge Baradon is I do his research and his drafting for civil cases. So I do the initial draft, I give it to him, and then he gives me feedback, and we go back and forth until it's finished. So judges definitely do rely on their staff quite a bit to get everything finished. And they also, the bailiffs run their dockets. We have an amazing bailiff in our courtroom, Adam Iser. He's fantastic. He runs our courtroom like it's amazing the way he does it. So if judges recruit their staff and based on how talented, or at least they should, on how talented they are, and also people who are willing to disagree with the judge. I think that's really important. And you got to have people there who will do the job, but also offer a different opinion when it's needed.
Oh, that's awesome. So we're learning stuff here every day. I love that. I don't know how they all do it, but you guys do a great job. So we appreciate that. Let me touch on a couple of things here from a campaign perspective as we come up. The time goes so fast, I can't believe it. We're already coming up on a half hour. It flies by. But from the campaign perspective, I think this is great because we're repeating this message out there for folks that, for our Democratic endorsed judicial slate, which we made great progress. We unfortunately didn't quite get you in there in 2018. I take partial blame. I was out there working for the slate. If I would have worked harder, we would have got you in there, but we needed to get it done this time, folks. But it's difficult because if I don't have that slate card, I go in and then the judges don't have a D or R by their name. Now we know it's challenging in these COVID times, right? I know you are somebody that's out there with the people knocking on doors and stuff, and so that's almost impossible to do right now. So we're doing things like this in social media. But how's the campaign been? And tell us a little of the challenges. And the other thing is, it's hard to raise money just anyway, but then it's super weird for judicial candidates because you're not allowed to specifically ask. So I'm allowed to on Ginger's behalf. Everybody needs to go on her website and drop a campaign donation on there to help her out. But how's the campaign been during this COVID times?
It's been weird. In 2018, I was everywhere at all times. My kids got a taste of what the campaign life was like because they came with me a lot. I canvassed most days, at least some, or I was at a festival or just some sort of presentation or event. Even though a lot of these things have gone virtual, it's not the same because you miss the 20 minutes or a half hour beforehand where you get to actually go around and meet people.
Right.
And that part's missing. We're still doing lit drops, but we're not canvassing, we're not knocking on doors, so we're not interacting with voters. So it's a lot more difficult all the way around to try to get the message out. I'm very thankful at the effort of our slate of 13 local plus the 2 Supreme Court candidates. Everybody's putting forth so much effort to try to make sure that people are educated on who we are, what we stand for, and the fact that we are the Democrats. And, hopefully people will get that message by the time they vote either at home or at the ballot box.
No, I love that. And then certainly that's one of the things, and I think as a party, we're getting more and more organized in that way. We're seeing the power of the slate. Of course, the demographics in Hamilton County have us trending blue anyway. But I think all of this work, especially for what we would call the quote unquote down ballot races, And so historically, we've seen a drop off. Like I'll go in, I'll vote for president, and I get down to these judicial races, and maybe I haven't done my homework like a proper voter, and so I don't know all the names. And then if I know I'm a Democrat and I want to vote for people who have my like principles, I would want to, but I don't. And now I don't see either a D or an R. So now I don't know what they're doing, flipping a coin or just not voting. And so we see that drop off, down the ballot where people tend to vote less and less and less. So it's just that importance of the slate. Is that what we're doing? We're urging people, right, to get the slate card, make sure everybody's got that slate card so we see who all our teammates are.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. We're doing our best to get that in everybody's hands. When I post things on social media, I usually include the slate card so that people can easily find it. And I know that my slate mates are doing the same thing.
Well, from a campaign perspective, that's just super powerful to continue to leverage that and everybody working together. So speaking of campaigns, one of the cool things that I love about Ginger Bock, maybe it was the luck of the draw, I don't know, but you're the only candidate that I've ever heard of that actually has a beer named after them. And of course, being down here in Over the Rhine, Bock Fest and Oktoberfest and Bocktoberfest, super popular time of the year. So speaking of campaign events, what do you got going on in that regard? I'm looking around, I'm waiting for my Ginger Bock beer to show up on my doorstep here.
Yeah, so we are having, the party actually is having Bocktoberfest. It'll be September 16th, and Aftab and Steve Dettelbach are going to be on a panel with me, and we will really just, talk about my campaign some, but it'll also be talking about Oktoberfest and, whatever, talking about the courts in general, and of course talking about the beer, because we do have a Bocktoberfest. It was bottled about a week and a half ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, and I hear it is absolutely delicious, although I have not tried it yet. So I'm really excited that we have this opportunity. The first 50 people who purchase tickets will get a Bocktoberfest delivered straight to their door. It should be a fun event. It's virtual. We thought about having it in person, but decided I didn't want to take the health risk. So It will be virtual, and I really hope that we get a good crowd there.
No, that's awesome. So let's do this. Let's make sure we drop that in the comments. Drop the link to that in the comments so folks can hop on there and sign up. And that's going to be cool.
You need to go to the Hamilton County Democratic Party Facebook page, and there's a link to the event there.
Cool. All right. We'll make sure we have the link here for everybody to easily find in our comments. We got another couple folks dropping by, and I always love and appreciate that. So thank you all for not only watching but commenting. So Lynn says, what area in our justice system do you want to focus on? What do you want to fix? And we touched on that a little bit earlier about the sentencing database, so that we have we don't have in Ohio any kind of a database that shows the demographic data and how people are being sentenced, so that we can compare and contrast. Is there anything beyond that you would like to focus on as well?
Yeah, there's two other main areas that I want to focus. First of all, I want to make implicit bias training a requirement. Right now, attorneys have to get 24 hours of continuing legal education every year, and they have to get a certain amount of substance abuse training, as well as professionalism or ethics. So that's a requirement. Certain hours in those specific areas. I want to make implicit bias training an area that is mandatory as well, and I will advocate for that. Because I think that is so important, because you don't know what you don't know. And even people who are good-hearted and who are trying to do the right thing, their decisions might be based on something other than the facts and the law, simply because of a bias that they don't even know that they have. Right. So that's one thing that I want to do. Another thing is I want to create a program so when I was a baby lawyer, I had a Supreme Court case where the client didn't have a whole lot of money, and I really wanted the experience, so I didn't charge her much at all. And she had lost at every other level, at the magistrate, the trial court, and the 12th district. I took it to the Supreme Court, and she won unanimously. So I got that awesome experience, and she won. So it was a win-win. I want to take that further. I want to take that so that, you know, that sort of thing where we set up people who can't afford an attorney at the appellate level. And I'm talking about civil cases right now because criminal defendants are entitled to counsel. So civil parties who can't afford counsel with attorneys who want experience, as well as a mentorship program. I had a mentor helping me that I couldn't have done it without it. So I want to work with the Bar Association, law firms, law schools to make sure that happens, because that's just one less barrier to justice that's taken away if we get that implemented.
Well, that's amazing, and you know, it sounds like you've got a lot of plans, a lot of stuff on your plate. Honestly, I had no idea that an appeals court judge could even get all of those things done, but certainly, for me, first and foremost, all of that sounds great. But this work on getting this data available so that we can make sure, especially in this day and age when we're focused on criminal justice reform, I think it's a travesty in the state of Ohio that we can't see what the sentencing data is. I mean, it could be crazy, but we don't even know, like, the disparities. There's no way to even see, or maybe we're doing a great job. I don't know, but nobody knows because we can't. There's no place to check.
It makes it really hard to advocate for somebody on an appeal. I mean, if you can't look back and see this is what the norm is and this is what my client got, it makes it a lot more difficult for an appellate attorney to be able to advocate on behalf of their client.
No, this is important work. So I encourage everybody to go, and I will again drop this in the comments as well. Ginger's website is ginger4judge.com. And so go on there, drop her a little contribution, a little Scooby snack, as I like to call them. Any amount will be greatly appreciated. Those yard signs don't pay for themselves, right? So go on there and do that. And at the end of the day, share the slate, share this video, share Ginger's posts, because I think we've heard an amazing case for why she should be our next judge on the Hamilton County First District Court of Appeal. So how's that for a pitch? Did I do okay?
You did great, Derek. You always do great.
Awesome. Well, hey, look, we just went through 40 minutes like it wasn't even a thing. But thank you so much for joining us this evening, Ginger. Thank you for sharing your background and your story. And your passion for making sure that our justice system is working the way it's supposed to and that it's fair for everybody. And that's why we need you on there. So thank you so much. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Derek. I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. And with that being said, everybody, thank you all for watching. We've had a lot of folks joining us over the course of this half hour plus. As always, I will upload this onto my YouTube channel. Do a little YouTube search on there. Derek Bauman should pop right up. And please share this post. Help us get the message out. As we mentioned, and as Ginger mentioned, it's challenging in these COVID times for candidates, especially like Ginger, who want to get that out and connect with the people. This is how we have to do it. So thank you for doing that. And again, thank you for joining us, Ginger. And I'm sure we'll be talking to you soon. All right. Have a great night, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks.